Hi, I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the Something Scary podcast, 4th of July special edition. We decided to put together some of your favorite, scariest summertime stories into one long episode. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you have a scary holiday.
So, want to hear something scary? American horror. Every summer camp has a long history of urban legends and folklore, but rarely do you get to witness those deadly tales yourself, like in this story written by Sarah Lukasiewicz. From a candlelit seance to light as a feather, stiff as a board, slumber parties are the perfect opportunity for teens to dabble in the dark lore of urban legends. And for Evie and her friends Danny and Jenna, their July 4th slumber party was going to be an ominous night. They had spent most of their evening watching fireworks and gossiping about their crushes. But as the night was winding down, Danny had a story to tell. They had heard all about Bloody Mary and Candyman before. The legend goes that if you repeat Bloody Mary or Candyman several times, the entity appears and kills whoever summoned it. But Danny had a similar yet modern legend to share, one that she had heard about at summer camp the month before. Danny explained that in one of the neighboring cabins at camp, a group of campers were playing I See Me, I See You, and one of them ended up dead. The game works by placing a phone in the middle of the circle with everyone sitting around it. Someone spins it. Whoever the camera end of the phone stops in front of takes their turn. That person picks up the phone and unlocks the camera in selfie mode. Looking into the reflection, they say the words, I see me, I see you, 3 times in a row. That's when supposedly their reflection appears behind them and murders them in real life. Evie laughed and said she heard that the kid died from an asthma attack. Danny then challenged Evie to try the game just to be sure. Ginny pulled out her phone and laid it down in the middle of all of them, provoking Evie once more. Trying to hide her fear, Evie finally agreed. Danny took the cell and began to spin it. It only went around a couple of times before landing on Evie. You did that on purpose, Evie huffed. They just stared, waiting for her to grab the phone. Realizing they weren't going to budge, Evie opened the phone and hit the camera button. She looked into her reflection. It was in the dark room, with just enough ambient light shining in the background that she could see her bedroom window behind her. I see me. I see you, Danny reminded her. Evie began. With each word, she stared into the phone, attempting to make out any change in reflection behind her. I see me. I see you, she muttered. I see me. I see you, she trailed off, seeing a human-sized shadow behind her in her reflection. She threw the phone down, kicking it away and breathing heavily. Refusing to let her quit, Danny handed Evie back the phone, telling her to stop being afraid and finish it. Evie regained courage and acquiesced to their demands. She opened the camera again and said the phrases as fast as she could. I see me, I see you. I see me, I see you. I see me, I see you. There, I did it. Danny told her to keep looking and tell them if she could see anything. In the reflection, Evie began to see something moving behind her again. She looked closer into the phone. She saw someone crawling in through the window over her shoulder. Evie began to tremble. The person crawling toward her looked just like her. Same color hair and face, but clearly dead. This was a corpse version of her. The creature's bones seemed to snap and break over and over with every move. Jenna and Danny could now see the fear in Evie's face, and they tried to grab the phone from her and see what she saw, but Evie couldn't let go. It was as if something had control of her to make sure she couldn't look away. The creature crawled up behind Evie and wrapped its hands around her throat. Danny and Jenna, still trying to peel the phone away, could now see that Evie couldn't breathe. Handprints appeared on her throat, squeezing the life out of her. The pressure was so tight that Evie's eyes bulged and veins in her forehead throbbed. Within moments, the capillaries in Evie's eyes burst and blood began to pour from the sockets. Then, as Danny and Jenna almost had the phone freed from her grip, Evie's neck snapped. They screamed in terror as they fled the room. next to Evie's dead body, the phone lay face up, with the screen open. In the camera, the entity could be seen crawling out of the window, stopping once to admire its handiwork before disappearing into the night once more. Have you ever been pressured to play a spooky game at a slumber party when you really didn't want to? Did you experience anything paranormal? Did everyone survive? And what game was it? Tell us about it at SomethingScary@snarled.com. There can be bullies anywhere, and Jamestown, Tennessee is no exception. But when the bullied fight back, you better be prepared for their wrath. Based on an urban legend written by Janine Pipe. Billy gingerly peeked out of the bathroom stall. Empty. At least he could wash his trembling hands in peace. He rested his head against the tarnished mirror and closed his eyes, blinking back a fresh set of tears. Rest would be short. He had to leave the sanctity of the bathroom eventually and head back to class. Although the bullies wouldn't be able to hurt him in front of a teacher, they would do their best to make him fear what might come later. That was often the worst part, the anticipation of what might come, where they might find him hiding. He'd been so lost in thought he hadn't heard the door creak open. Now he felt the hot breath against his neck, causing his stomach to clench, cold sweat running down his back. Before he was able to move, he was shoved full force into the mirror. Maybe it was because Billy's body had tensed, but somehow as his face met the glass, it shattered. He lost his balance and slipped, smashing his forehead into the porcelain sink. What the bully couldn't have foreseen was that the piece of the mirror had stuck between Billy's eyes and was smashed into the sink. It drove that shard into his brain, killing him instantly. As Billy's now lifeless body sank to the floor, the bully panicked. Rather than feel remorseful for the heinous crime he'd just committed, he was far more worried about being caught. Being that the school was in need of several structural repairs, he was able to easily pry loose some of the floorboards in the bathroom and stow Billy's small body in the space. He covered it up, and it was days before Billy was found. When the authorities finally discovered the corpse, it appeared he had been desperately trying to escape, indicating he had not been dead when buried under the floor. No small town wants to be known for such a callous act. Pine Haven, Tennessee was no different, and the case was covered up for years. The school shut down in the 90s, supposedly due to irreparable damages. A new one was built, but the old building remained cheaper to abandon rather than demolish. It stands broken, rotting, vandalized, and like a beacon for teenagers. Despite safety warnings, once they've heard this legend, they continue to break in. Just like I did. I was careful to navigate the broken glass. I made sure to dodge abandoned furniture. I crept toward the boys' bathroom where an innocent life was cruelly snuffed short, and I dared to peer into the smeared mirror that stands like a cold memorial. I was completely alone. Hadn't told anyone else where I planned to be. No one followed me in. Part of me wanted to see something, to be able to recount my own story. But as the room began to feel icy, it suddenly didn't seem like such a good idea. I knew there must be drafts in old buildings, but it was a summer evening, and I could see my breath. Nope, not good. I quickly turned my head back out of the room when the door slammed shut. The few cubicles that still had doors began to shake too, as if a strong force of wind was controlling them. I knew what Billy wanted, so I made myself look in the mirror, knowing I'd see his ghostly face, but there was nothing. I even managed to laugh a little. What an idiot. Of course, the place was just full of breezes causing doors to bang. I scared myself good and proper. I turned around to leave, still chuckling at how ridiculous the whole thing was when I saw him. I didn't have time to scream. Unlike in life, he is by no means weak or vulnerable in death. Billy eternally seeks revenge for his untimely demise. He will stare into your soul, and if he believes you to be a potential threat, well, let's just say he might exact his vengeance upon you, allowing history to repeat itself. Thankfully, aside from being a fool for venturing into the dangerous building alone, Billy deemed me harmless and the bathroom door flew open again. I needed no more encouragement and ran out like a bat out of hell all the way home. I will never again believe myself brave enough to go ghost hunting, especially when the hunted might just be me. So ghost hunting is something I know a lot about. I've been going to spooky locations for over 3 years now, and I've done most of them alone. Something I don't condone others to do because it's really scary and super dangerous. Most recently, I visited an abandoned insane asylum with a group of friends, and we got some really compelling paranormal evidence. So tell me, if you had the chance, where would you go ghost hunting? In the Midwest of the United States lies Michigan, known for its beautiful Great Lakes and lively city of Detroit. A great place to visit, but I wouldn't be caught dead on Knock Knock Road, like in this true story inspired by NB. Growing up just outside of Detroit, I could always hold my own. In a place like that, you get street smart. A few months ago, as I approached my 18th birthday, it was put to the test. Rumors had spread for years about Knock Knock Road. That was what everyone called it. Officially, it was Strawburg Road, running between 8 Mile and East McNichols Road. It runs right through what you would consider suburbia, but don't let the streetlights and secure-looking houses fool you. If it's late at night, you're on your own. So, for my birthday celebration, my friends and I decided to meet at a park along Strawburg. The night started off normal. Just a handful of friends messing about, laughing and listening to music. Then Stacy said it. "Let's do a drive." Such simple words. I felt the energy change, but we rushed to the car anyway, pressing our luck. The legend goes that in the mid-1940s, a girl was walking along Strawburg and was mowed down by a careless driver. They were never caught. The town did add a solitary stop sign right where she was hit to slow the traffic in her honor. Since that night, hundreds of people have said that if it's past 12 a.m. and you're waiting at that stop sign, you'll hear a rapping at your window. The ghost of the dead girl appears next to you, searching for her murderer. Yet, as scary as that sounded, nothing had ever really happened to anyone. So while I was hesitant, I didn't actually believe we'd see anything. A fog swirled in front of the sedan as we crept toward the intersection. The wind began to pick up enough steam to be noticeable. I was in the passenger seat while Stacy drove. Now we were here. Chills ran over me. Before I knew it, there was a knock to my side. Everyone in the car jumped. Was it a knock, or was it the wind blowing debris around? Were our minds playing tricks on us? We sat very still, intently listening for the slightest noise. 20 seconds passed, and then thump, thump, thump. We all screamed, the surrounding fog making it hard to see anything out of the windows. Then, whatever had banged on the door began to drag itself to the front of the car around the driver's side of Stacy. It was like this thing was keying the car and then it suddenly stopped abruptly. After a moment of silence, the fog cleared instantly, revealing the girl we'd heard so much about from sleepover stories and idle gossip. She stood there, covered in blood, her head lolling to one side where her neck had been snapped. Then, quick as a flash, she thrust her arms through the driver's window, grabbed Stacy by the throat, and ripped her from the car. She pulled Stacy, kicking and squirming in front of the hood of the car. The light shone on them, showing us everything like a terrifying movie. We were frozen in fear, watching the scene play out. There was a horrific snap as she broke Stacy's neck with an impossible ease, dropping her body like a sack of potatoes. As we all screamed, the ghost vanished. We've told that story, unedited and identical, over and over again to the cops and authorities in our town. But due to the high crime in the area, they continue to devote their efforts to real-life murderers and not ghosts from an urban legend. Stacy's death remains unsolved, but we will never even venture near the side streets that lead to Strawburg in order to avoid the very true legend of Knock Knock Road. Would you be brave enough to visit Knock Knock Road? If you encountered the ghost girl, what would you do? And what's an urban legend from your town? Let us know by emailing SomethingScary@snarled.com.
Few people share a greater connection with each other than identical twins. But sometimes the strongest bonds are the most tempting for evil to break. Like in this story inspired by Shavy. Twin sisters Alina and Luna were expecting cell phones for their 10th birthdays. But after losing her job, it had been a difficult year for their mother. So instead, she visited a local consignment shop, hoping to find something less expensive that her daughters would still love. There was lots of junk, and as she was about to give up, she spotted the perfect gift. Later that night, the twins excitedly opened their gifts to discover that they had both been given dolls that were identical to each other. The plastic toy girl stood about a foot tall. Alina's doll wore a fluffy blue dress while Luna's wore a white one. Although they were exactly the same, Alina was terrified of Luna's doll. It seemed like there was life behind its unblinking eyes. Eventually, Alina got bored of her own doll and moved on to other toys and games, but Luna never wanted to part with hers. She was obsessed with it and named it Josephine. Alina's fear of the doll only grew as her sister gave it a name that made it even more alive. As Luna grew closer to Josephine, she grew further apart from her identical twin sister. They did not play together or even talk as much as they once did. Their mother failed to notice this rift as she was focused on finding a new job. Alina decided not to mention it to her mom for fear it would make her more stressed than she already was. Luna's fixation with the doll, Josephine, got to the point where she sat and stared at it for hours. Soon, she even wanted to look like Josephine and wore a white dress every day so the two could match. One night, Alina opened the bedroom door and saw Luna standing alone in the dark. She was holding Josephine and still wearing the white dress. Luna looked more similar to the doll than her twin sister. Then Luna whispered something to Josephine. "Who are you talking to, Luna?" Alina cried. Luna ignored Alina and said, "You're the best sister I've ever had, Josephine. I wish you were real so we could be together forever." She then carefully placed Josephine on the bedside table and went to bed. Alina got into her own bed, and when she glanced over at the scary doll, she found it looking directly at her. Luna was already fast asleep, but Alina couldn't possibly sleep with that thing staring at her. So she went over to the table and turned the doll's face to the other side. She walked backwards to her bed, never taking her eyes off of it. Suddenly, Josephine turned its head towards Alina, all by itself. Alina screamed in horror. Luna leapt out of her bed, but her eyes were still closed. Alina called for her sister, but realized she was still fast asleep. Luna picked Josephine up, her hands trembling. It almost looked like she was being controlled by the doll. Josephine then moved both of its arms towards Luna's face. Alina jumped out of bed and ran to her mother's room, screaming at the top of her lungs. Her mother was confused by what her daughter was saying, so Alina took her hand and led her to the doorway of the twins' room. Luna stepped towards them, the doll still in her hands, both with the same unblinking eyes. Alina and her mother watched in terror as Luna began to convulse uncontrollably. Her skin tightened and became shiny as Luna turned into plastic and quickly shrank in size. Alina burst out in tears as she realized that Luna was no longer her twin. She was Josephine's. Thank you so much for inspiring this possessed doll story, Shavy. Not only that, but a doll possessed with a type of power to be able to convert the world around it. Listener, have you ever received a gift you suspected was evil? Is there anyone in your life you're so close to, you feel like you could read their mind? Identical twins are said to be able to do that. Is there anything you own that gives you the creeps? You should not be held responsible for the sins of your parents, but sometimes you are, and you better hope you're ready for the consequences, like in this story inspired by PR. Last year, my parents took my sister Ivy and me on an unexpected road trip. We were driving cross-country to Yosemite National Park for the 4th of July. My parents had both been on edge during the trip, particularly my dad, which was strange because he was a long-distance truck driver and made these kinds of drives frequently. Once we crossed the state border into California, we stopped at a gas station. It was around midnight and there was no one around. While my parents refilled the RV with gas, Ivy and I used the restroom. As we entered the mucky facilities, we couldn't help but notice a vile stench. "It smells like someone just died," I said. I looked at Ivy and her face was full of fear. I followed her eyes to the gap below a stall. There was someone or something in there. It was in the shape of a person, but made of thick dust and swirling gnats. The noise of the swarm swelled until it became a voice that whispered, "Scarlet!" That was my name. I grabbed my sister's hand and we rushed back outside to the RV. We didn't know what happened. We were both too freaked out to say anything to our parents, who were already tense. We finally arrived at the campground in the early hours of the morning. The whole family tried to get some sleep before the fireworks later that night, but I couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the person-shaped swarm of dust and bugs, and eventually, the putrid smell of something dead would fill my nose. When I finally managed to drift into sleep, I was jolted awake by a noise outside our RV. My heart pounded as I peeked outside, but it was just my dad. He paced back and forth and muttered something to himself. When he saw my face in the window, he walked away to the other side of the camp. The next day, we toured the beautiful park ahead of the fireworks later that night. Our parents were still tense and only seemed to pretend to have fun. As the sounds of nature surrounded us, they took on a familiar tone, and I could swear that I heard the same whisper of my name. "Scarlet! Scarlet! Scarlet!" was whispered over and over. Each time sounded more and more menacing, but no one else seemed to hear it. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was just sleep-deprived. I hoped the fireworks would cheer me up, cheer our whole family up. The sun set, and the fireworks lit up the sky. Finally, my parents were smiling real smiles. Tears welled up in my father's eyes. It was beautiful, except for the whispers still calling my name. They were somehow louder than the colorful booms that filled the sky. I thought I was crazy until I saw it, standing just at the edge of the tree line. The swirl of gnats and dust shaped like a person. The whispers grew even louder. A cacophony of debris and insect wings screamed my name. And then it said something new. "You have been marked. Sacrifice yourself, or everyone you love will perish." Suddenly I realized I was halfway across the campground and headed towards the tree line. The swarming creature compelled me to walk closer, and once I realized it was me or my family, I complied. The swarm walked towards me, and once I was close, it engulfed me. Bugs bit at me and the dirt scraped along my skin. In agony, I tried to run, but the swarm mirrored every move I made. It was one with me. and I dared not scream lest the bugs and dirt filled my mouth. Suddenly, something grabbed me and pulled me free. It was my dad. He picked up my scratched and bitten body and ran across the campground as fireworks blazed through the sky. But still, I heard the too loud whisper calling my name. My mom and sister were already in the RV, ready to leave. My dad shoved me inside and closed me in without him. He then yelled, "Take me instead, damn you," as my mom sped away. I looked out the back of the RV as the swarm ran after us and my dad chased after it. Eventually, it stopped running and turned on him until all I could see was the swarm lit by the fireworks finale. My mom drove silently in tears until finally she told us about the night my dad was driving this same stretch of road. He'd been driving too long and started to drift off when he accidentally hit and killed an old woman wandering along the side of the highway. As she died in his arms, she cursed him and said that a sacrifice had to be made or his family would perish. At first, he didn't believe it until his brother died exactly 1 year later, and then his mother died 1 year after that. This trip was supposed to be our last trip together as a family, and my dad planned to walk the same strip of road that night after the fireworks to make his sacrifice and break the curse. The only problem is that the curse chose me. It's been 1 year since that night, and as I listen to the sounds of nature whisper my name, I hope this year my sacrifice will be enough. Thank you so much, PR, for inspiring this haunting tale of family responsibility, of curses, of death. Is there anyone in your life you would sacrifice yourself for? Do you know of any ancient curses on your family, or maybe someone else you know? Tell us about it at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. If you're brave enough to conquer the fears growing inside you, then you might just conquer the monsters causing them as well. Like in this story, inspired by Anna Stacy. Ever since they moved into the old house, Davina told her mother she was afraid of the dark. The girl never wanted to go to bed and insisted her mother sit with her until she fell asleep. She was only 5 years old, and her mother figured Davina would eventually grow out of it. But it only got worse with each passing day. Davina soon claimed that a terrifying, mangled-looking man covered in blood, with bloodshot eyes and sharp fangs, lived in her walls. She said that the man would emerge through the walls and stand over her, breathing so loudly that she was certain he was real. She told her mother that she opened her eyes just one time and was so petrified by the appearance of his maimed, bloody face that she never dared to open her eyes again. Repeatedly, Davina told her mother stories about the man and about the walls and their house. She said they were alive and breathing and always watching. Davina's mother assumed she had an overactive imagination or watched a scary movie that she wasn't supposed to see. She decided that if the stories continued, she would take her daughter to a therapist, but that all changed the night she finally saw the mangled man with bloodshot eyes. Late one night, as Davina's mother prepared to finally turn in, she checked in on her sleeping daughter and froze. There was a man stooped over Davina, watching her intently as Davina mumbled in her sleep. The girl tossed and turned as the figure leaned over her, breathing loudly. Just as her mother was about to scream, the mangled man looked right at her, and she couldn't make a sound. The man's face was made of nightmares, butchered and bloody, just as Davina had described. The man's mouth curled into a wicked smile, and he charged at the woman. She closed her eyes and stumbled backwards, preparing for the worst, but then she suddenly heard Davina's voice. "Stop!" Davina shouted. Audra waited for the monster to get her, but nothing happened. When she opened her eyes, she saw that it had listened to Davina and stopped just inches from her face. It leered at the woman like she was the juiciest piece of meat that it just couldn't have. Davina stood up from her bed, her eyes still clenched shut, and shouted that her mother was not to be hurt. The mangled man with bloodshot eyes cowered down at Davina's feet like a reprimanded puppy, but it glared at her like she was his next meal. "Mom, close your eyes," Davina commanded. "He can't hurt you unless you look at him. Now close your eyes." Davina's mother squeezed her eyes shut and kept them that way until Davina said it was safe to open them again. When she did, everything looked so normal, except for a bloody smear on the floor that continued straight up the wall. Davina's mother cried out and demanded to know if her daughter was hurt. Davina said she was fine and explained that the mangled man was called Bloody Sam. He entered her room every night looking for dinner. But he would never hurt Davina, and she discovered he actually listens to her. Davina then looked at the bloody smear on the floor and wall and demanded for Sam to clean up his mess. Right before their eyes, the trail of blood retreated from the floor and seeped straight through the wallpaper with a loud slurp. Davina added a "thank you," and her mother had to take a seat on the bed. Davina explained it was probably the blood of a raccoon. She told her mother that she gave Bloody Sam rules he had to follow. He was not allowed to eat pets or people, obviously. Other than that, Davina doesn't ask questions. She just keeps her eyes shut. After that incident, Davina's mother considered selling the house and moving far away. But she realized that only her daughter knew how to control the monster. The next family to move in might not be so lucky, and she couldn't live with their deaths hanging over her family. So mother and daughter lived together in the house, and as both got older, Davina's mother couldn't help but wonder what would happen when her daughter finally left this world and Bloody Sam roamed free. Thank you so much, Anastasia, for this tale of Bloody Sam. Have you ever conquered any of your fears? Was it worth it? Or were there terrible consequences?
The supernatural world may hold secrets that we cannot escape, no matter how hard we try. Like in this story inspired by Asa. Madeline's summer in the town of Brazil, Indiana had been a dull affair so far. Dying for a little excitement, she begged to join her older cousin Jordan and his friends in their late-night outings. She knew they were getting into trouble and having fun, and she wanted in. However, Jordan thought his cousin was too young and inexperienced. He warned her that she couldn't handle the adventure. Determined to prove herself, Madeline pleaded with Jordan to let her hang out with them. After some thought, Jordan devised a challenge for her. She could accompany them only if she completed the notorious 100 Steps game in the eerie cemetery that was filled with gravestones dating back to the 1860s. Legend had it that anyone caught within its boundaries at the stroke of midnight had to climb the steps and count to 100. At that precise moment, the ghost of an undertaker would materialize, revealing a ghastly vision of the person's impending death. On the descent, the visitor must count the steps once more. If the number matched their initial count, the vision was deemed false, and they could carry on as normal. But if the numbers didn't match... Uncertain about this challenge, Madeline hesitated before agreeing. However, Jordan's friend Zachary, who claimed to have successfully undertaken the stairs before, assured her that she shouldn't worry. He had been told he would die in a fire, yet he stood before her unscathed. Filled with a mix of anxiety about the cemetery and reassurance from Zachary, Madeline declared that she would go through with it. One night later that week, Jordan and his friends drove Madeline to the eerie cemetery, just moments before the clock struck midnight. Summoning her courage, she embarked on the daunting challenge. Each step she took was resolute, her mind dismissing the notion of supernatural interference. Yet as she climbed, the wind suddenly grew fierce, chilling the air around her, making it harder to reach the top. Finally, she made it to step 100. Her eyes became locked in a trance-like state. Panicked, she tried to turn to go back down the stairs, but her feet refused to cooperate. She was rooted to the spot. In that eerie moment, Madeline's worst fears materialized as she witnessed a haunting vision of her death. It appeared to her in a flash in the sky above her. Although the details were hazy, it looked like some type of horrific car accident. The vehicle had careened off the road, engulfed in flames. Terror seized her heart. Then an instant later, she was released. She dropped to her knees and tried to orient herself. As soon as her head cleared, she jumped up and quickly ran back down the steps, her mind racing with desperate thoughts of outwitting the unearthly forces. But they had other plans. Just as she reached the bottom, attempting to count ahead and evade the harbinger of doom, an invisible force violently shoved her to the ground. Disoriented and panic-stricken, Madeline realized she hadn't counted the same number of steps on her descent. Fear consumed her, and she frantically refused to enter the car with her cousin and his friends. She didn't want to die in a car accident or be the cause of their demise. The atmosphere grew thick with tension as Jordan and his friends exchanged bewildered glances. They pleaded with her to get in the car, not wanting to leave her in the creepy cemetery at night. Madeline's instincts, however, screamed at her to resist. Something was horribly wrong. After arguing to no avail, Jordan reluctantly drove off with his friends, insisting she walk. Even if it took her all night, Madeline staggered home alone in the dark. Empty roads, her mind in a haze. She couldn't shake the eerie premonition of her death. Lost in her thoughts, Madeline didn't notice a car hurtling around the bend. It swerved uncontrollably, careening off the road and crashing to a halt against the trees. In a sudden surge of adrenaline, she snapped out of her daze and rushed to help the driver. But as she approached, her heart sank. It was Zachary. He must have returned to check on her. Overwhelmed by remorse, Madeline blamed herself for the tragic turn of events. She desperately tried to pull Zachary from the mangled car, but before she could succeed, the engine exploded in a fiery inferno. That devastating moment, both Madeline and Zachary met their untimely demise. The 100 Steps Cemetery had spoken its grim truth. The vision of death it had shown Madeline had come to pass, as it always did. Have you ever been involved in testing out a superstition? Did you witness a paranormal myth come true? If so, send us an email and tell us your story at SomethingScary@snarled.com. Sometimes, when you're willing to make a sacrifice for someone you love, you don't consider the long-term damage you'll endure. Like in this story inspired by Henny. Jeannie had her travel pack ready to go. It held the bare necessities. She had to keep it light. She ventured out into the vastness of the unforgiving landscape. The dry desert wind howled through the air of New Mexico. The scorching sun had long since set, leaving her to navigate the darkness with only one flashlight. She didn't want to risk losing the battery power on her cell phone. Not that there was any service anyway. She was far from civilization, surrounded by nothing but shifting dunes and prickly cacti. She was driven by a desperate need to find her missing brother, Miguel. And yet, the legend that plagued the desert plains weighed heavily on her mind. She could almost hear the name being whispered on the wind. A name that sent shivers down the spines of those who knew the tales of her. La Mala Hora. The entity was said to haunt the desolate roads, preying on lost souls. The terrifying stories passed down through generations warned against venturing alone into the desert after sunset, for encountering La Mala Hora would lead to madness and a slow, agonizing death. Miggs had disappeared several days before while exploring the abandoned ghost town that lay buried beneath the expansive sand dunes. Jeannie had received an anonymous tip that he was last seen near an old crossroads deep in the desert. She couldn't help but think of the crossroads where the legend of La Mala Hora took place. Frightened but determined, Jeannie trudged through the shifting sands, her heart filled with worry for her brother's safety. The desert appeared to stretch on forever, its vastness seeming to swallow her whole. The eerie silence weighed heavy on her, broken only by the occasional howl of the wind. But her love for Miggs drove her forward, refusing to be deterred by fear. As she neared the crossroads, a sense of unease settled over her. The air felt charged, as if an unseen presence lurked just beyond her line of sight. Jeannie's hand trembled as she tightened her grip on the flashlight, the beam piercing through the darkness. Lighting up the night sky, it revealed the figure of a woman standing at the intersection. Jeannie's heart froze. She knew immediately it was La Mala Hora, the embodiment of her worst nightmares. The entity's eyes seemed to bore into Jeannie's soul, her presence suffocating. She felt her sanity slipping away, even as she wondered if what she was seeing was real, or just her mind playing tricks on her. But as La Mala Hora began to shift and contort into a mass of darkness, Jeannie knew this was really happening. Thankfully, the love of her brother gave her a fierce determination to survive. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jeannie tore her gaze away from the apparition and sprinted past the crossroads, her heart pounding on her chest. She could feel the pull of La Mala Hora's gaze behind her, but she refused to succumb to its clutches. Mig's life depended on her strength. Days turned into sleepless nights as Jeannie relentlessly searched for her brother, haunted by the encounter with La Mala Hora. The environment continually fought against her, with shifting dunes and deceptive mirages leading her in circles. But she refused to give up, clinging to the glimmer of hope that Miggs was still alive. Finally, in a forgotten corner of the ghost town, Jeannie discovered a hidden entrance to an underground cavern. Her heart raced as she descended into the depths, her flashlight piercing the darkness. And there, huddled in a corner, she found Miggs. He was weak and dehydrated with a busted ankle, but alive. She broke down in tears and held her brother, giving him what little water she had left. Jeannie told him about her run-in with La Mala Hora, explaining how the legend had nearly consumed her. Mig's eyes widened with terror as he realized what his sister had endured to save him. They vowed to leave the desert and never look back. As they left the desert behind, Miguel, able to lean against his sister for support, they carried with them an appreciation for each other and a determination to never let the darkness claim them again. They safely arrived home and started on the healing journey of getting their bodies and minds back after the whole ordeal. But Jeannie's restless nights never ceased, forever haunted by that night, always thinking that things were moving or out of place, blaming La Mala Hora for messing with her. Jeannie is still alive today, proving the legend wrong. She didn't die, But on those dark, daunting nights when all she can see is the face of evil, sometimes she wishes she were dead. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you lost your sibling or loved one? Would you endure the supernatural to get them back? Sometimes, when you constantly condemn someone as wicked instead of trying to understand them, they may eventually succumb to our terrible expectations. Like in this story inspired by Abigail. I grew up in New Hampshire with my mom and grandparents, and one summer, I couldn't seem to catch a break. It felt like a string of bad luck had latched onto me, refusing to let go. That's when my grandpop, who didn't speak very much, sat me down. In a haunted voice, he told me that it wasn't just bad luck. It was the curse of Goody. I was terrified, not having a clue what he meant. He leaned in closer, his eyes filled with dread, and began to unravel a tale that had tormented Hampton for centuries. According to Grandpop, the curse of Goody Cole had cast its dark shadow upon our town since the 1600s. Eunice Goody Cole, a name etched into the Hamptons' history, was the woman no one dared to speak of. She held the dubious honor of being the only woman in our state's history to face not one, but 2 trials of witchcraft. It all began in the year 1656 when the first accusations came flying at her. Dark magic, unholy pacts with the devil, you name it, they accused her of it. The townsfolk, gripped by their fear of her wicked powers, wasted no time in holding a trial and declaring her guilty of the most perverse and abhorrent acts imaginable. She was sentenced to prison, but that was only the beginning of the nightmare. 15 years later, in 1671, Goody Cole found herself once again standing before the judgmental eyes of Hampton's residents. This time, the accusations were far graver, fueled by the sinister notion that she had somehow eluded her previous punishment. She was accused of causing damage to people without even leaving her prison cell. The trial that unfolded was a macabre spectacle, witnesses recounting bone-chilling encounters and inexplicable occurrences that seemed to trail in Goody Cole's wake. And once again, the damning verdict deemed she was guilty, sealing her gruesome fate. But even in death, they couldn't banish the alleged curse of Goody Cole. Her spirit was said to linger, a malignant presence that crept into every crack and crevice of our cursed town. People whispered in hushed tones, believing that she was the cause of the misfortunes that had plagued Hampton's citizens for the past 3 centuries. One harrowing incident, forever etched in our town's memory, occurred on a peaceful summer day. A boat filled with Hampton's residents, including my ancestor Abigail, embarked on a leisurely sail that really seemed to shake my grandpop. He said quite suddenly, the tranquility was shattered as the boat capsized, casting everyone aboard into the water. Panic and terror reigned as they struggled in vain against the rocky waters. Strangely, despite being within reach of the shore, not a single soul survived. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community, and in their grief-stricken state, the accusatory fingers once again pointed at Goody Cole. Whispers spread like wildfire, claiming that she had cursed the ill-fated boat, stripping its passengers of their ability to swim. It was as if they had forgotten the very skill that had preserved their lives countless times before. The townsfolk, paralyzed by fear and consumed by grief, clung desperately to ancient belief that Goody Cole's dark powers were to blame. They trembled at the mere thought of passing by her old house or even stepping on the land, terrified that her wrath could strike them next from well beyond the grave. As the years passed, the tales of Goody Cole grew more twisted and nightmarish. Her name became a symbol of terror, a specter that haunted the dreams of Hampton's residents. Bizarre happenings and tragic accidents were attributed to her malevolent, lingering spirit, strengthening the belief in her curse. But amidst the fear and dread, a few skeptical souls emerged. They dared to question whether Goody Cole truly held our town in her icy grip. They pondered if the legend had been fabricated, a collective fear that had birthed its own monstrous reality. Yet, even these doubters couldn't deny the palpable and chilling aura that hung over Hampton, the residual continuous presence of something otherworldly, lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The story of Goody Cole passed from parent to child, from generation to generation, becoming an inescapable part of our town's identity. The fear of her spectral presence had woven itself into the very fabric of Hampton, an invisible thread connecting us all. And as I sat there, listening to my grandpop's terrifying tale, I couldn't shake the feeling that the curse of Goody was far from over. It had sunk its claws deep into our souls, ready to claim its next victim, me. I did a number of Google searches and found some books on dealing with spirits. I lit candles and read a note to Goody that I left out for her on an altar. I let her know I was sorry for what happened to her. I was sure had she not been attacked, she could have used her powers for good, to heal and help. My luck seemed to change after that. My mom said it was just a coincidence. But I have a feeling even though Goody let go of her hold on me, she was still looking for her next victim in Hampton. Maybe someone who wasn't so understanding. And their bad luck might just be their undoing. Have you ever felt like your fate was something worse than just plain old bad luck? What did you do to change your life around?
This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled.